So what we'll do, and for those of you who've never been on the Game Changers platform or website, we are a full production company based in Oakland and Brooklyn. We produce independent short docs, and we've worked with a lot of filmmakers around the country, having them produce films. We have a filmmaker fellowship program also. You can learn more about us at GameChangersFilms.com. So the StoryLab is a monthly series that we do to really bring in experienced filmmakers, people who are entrepreneurs, people who work in the business aspects of films, cinematographers, directors, so forth. Last month we had a brother named Adisa, his film was actually at Pan African Film Festival last year. This film was called Skin in the Game, and it was a film about human trafficking. And it was a feature film, his first feature film. So he was on last month. We record these sessions, and so I'll be sending out that one and this one to our mailing list. But for today, we're gonna talk about the secrets, and not so much secrets, but just the science behind and the math behind financing films. It's a creative endeavor. A lot of people don't. I think a lot of independent filmmakers don't understand, kind of how they can get their films funded. So we'll talk about that. We're inviting our guest speaker is Peter Roach of Media Focus Group, and he'll be on. You'll learn about this gentleman's experience and working with major studios, working with independent filmmakers as well. And he'll take us through just what it takes to get a film funded, from concept to fully funded. And it'll just be an open discussion. Sometimes it is Saturday morning, so we're competing with a lot of things people do Saturday morning. So hopefully there will be some people that'll join. We usually get about 10 or 15 people. So we're gonna start off and have share a trailer. We always start with the trailer, so we'll share a trailer about Spike Lee talking about film financing. So what we'll do, and for those of you who've never been on the Game Changers platform or website, we are a full production company based in Oakland and Brooklyn. We produce independent short docs, and we've worked with a lot of filmmakers around the country, having them produce films. We have a filmmaker fellowship program also. You can learn more about us at GameChangersFilms.com. So the StoryLab is a monthly series that we do to really bring in experienced filmmakers, people who are entrepreneurs, people who work in the business aspects of films, cinematographers, directors, so forth. Last month we had a brother named Adisa, his film was actually at Pan African Film Festival last year. This film was called Skin in the Game, and it was a film about human trafficking. And it was a feature film, his first feature film. So he was on last month. We record these sessions, and so I'll be sending out that one and this one to our mailing list. But for today, we're gonna talk about the secrets, and not so much secrets, but just the science behind and the math behind financing films. It's a creative endeavor. A lot of people don't. I think a lot of independent filmmakers don't understand, kind of how they can get their films funded. So we'll talk about that. We're inviting our guest speaker is Peter Roach of Media Focus Group, and he'll be on. You'll learn about this gentleman's experience and working with major studios, working with independent filmmakers as well. And he'll take us through just what it takes to get a film funded, from concept to fully funded. And it'll just be an open discussion. Sometimes it is Saturday morning, so we're competing with a lot of things people do Saturday morning. So hopefully there will be some people that'll join. We usually get about 10 or 15 people. So we're gonna start off and have share a trailer. We always start with the trailer, so we'll share a trailer about Spike Lee talking about film financing. Can you hear it? No. Okay. Let's try it again. Wait a minute. All right. Go ahead and play it. Let's see if we hear it. Nope. Are we hearing that? Nope. Wow. We were just playing this earlier. Let me. Okay, we may have to come back to this. Sorry about this. Let's see.
And the issue is whether you're in film school or not
Hear
film
it
school,
now?
where you get the money to shoot.
So let's pause it for a
Spike,
second.
what are your general rules?
There
Yes, we can hear it.
All right, let's go.
For
About
raising
4
money
minutes.
for films, and what do you advise your NYU students when the subject comes up? What kind of guidance do you provide them?
Well, I've been teaching at NYU for the past 15 years, and the issue is whether you're in film school or not film school, where you get the money to shoot, where you get the money for completion, to finish your film. And I tell people you just have to be inventive, and you gotta look under every nook and cranny to get it done. There's nothing I could tell somebody it's gonna be like the golden trail and you're gonna find a pot of gold. You know, at the end, that's just not the way this industry works.
So there's no set roadmap, but I'm wondering, is there a certain mindset? Are there certain characteristics, whether they're temperament, whatever, that you tell someone?
Well, I think that when you're looking for money, you have to be tough as nails and not be deterred by no's. All it takes is that one person, that one grant, that one scholarship. You know, money can show up, can fall out of the sky sometimes. I mean, that's not something that you have to wait for. One of my own most favorite quotes is by Brooklyn Dodger owner Branch Rickey, who signed Jackie Robinson. And the quote is this: luck is a residue of design. So, if you're working and busting your ass, you have a better chance of luck smiling down upon you. But if you're just chilling and not extending any energy, don't get it from go. We're not seeing that elbow grease. We're not seeing initiative. We're not seeing that blood, sweat, and tears. Very rarely will you find yourself in a lucky situation.
Speaking of which,
But you can't depend on luck, though. You can't depend on luck. I've been very lucky. To be honest, when I decided I wanted to be a filmmaker, there was only one African American director working in Hollywood. His name was Michael Schultz, directed one of my favorite films, Cooley High. And so when I would tell my African American friends, you know, they're like, they let black people direct films? And so I never ever thought about the odds. A lot of times you think about stuff like that, it could be a self-inflicted paralysis. But I knew I wanted to do. And I was committed that through hard work, God willing, something will break my way, and it happened.
All right, Brother Spike. Well, without further ado, let's invite Peter Roach into the conversation, and Carrington Onyx York is my media intern and assistant who helps out a lot with this, and she's gonna start us off, and introduce us to Peter Roach. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Mr. Peter Roach, for joining us. I'm going to tell you a bit about Peter's career. Founded in 2009 by Peter R. Roach II, MFG is a full-service media and content provider and content finance facilitator. Media Focus Group provides consulting services in the areas of strategy, business, finance, and distribution. MFG is a worldwide distributor of multi-genre programming. Mr. Roach is the senior founding partner of Media Focus Group, LLC. His responsibilities include finance, business development, client relations, and he oversees the company's capital finance team. The capital finance team structures and evaluates financial models for media investments into TV and feature film investments. Media Focus Group also directs institutional financiers in feature film content investing. Welcome, Mr. Peter Roach.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So it's lovely to have you. I'm going to begin by asking some more questions about your lovely career. We learned a bit about it just now. I'm going to dig a bit deeper. So I was reading a bit about your career, and it seems that film wasn't always your focus. Can you tell me a bit about what inspired you to begin this firm? What inspired you to make a transition in your career? And can you tell us about that transition?
Sure. Well, at undergrad, I went to Hampton University. I was a political science and finance major. When I graduated, I went to play a little tennis on the tour. I then went to graduate school. And in graduate school, I met my roommate was the first trust fund baby I've ever met in my life. I tell this story all the time. And long and behold, after many conversations, I found out the reason why he was a trust fund baby and no one in his family works and just generations and generations of people had enormous wealth is because his great-great-grandfather bought the rights to Winnie the Pooh. They then lease it back to Disney. And Disney, for every teacup ride, for every Winnie the Pooh shirt, for every lunchbox they sell, his family gets a little bit of money, generationally. So I realized at that point in graduate school that content is king, and no matter what the platform you show it on, if you own content, those opportunities for that portfolio or that individual content, that intellectual property, can have enormous effects on your life and your family's life going forward. So I always knew that in the back of my head, but did because a good friend of mine who was married to Gabrielle Union at the time, and they were sending me scripts and and eventually I started looking at them and started figuring out the way that money could be put into movies without tremendous risk, having distribution, having the ability for movies to have a negative pickup, but don't have the money up front to make them. These are the kind of things that would allow the investors that I could bring to the table to have a guaranteed situation where they know that their money wasn't at risk in terms of loss, but the upside potential was still there. So when I saw that, I said that just makes sense. And I took a leap of faith. I left my job. I started a media focus group. And now we're 26 movies, 12 TV shows, and 3 Broadway plays later. And we're doing pretty good for ourselves.
Wow. What an interesting story. Winnie the Pooh, huh?
Winnie the Pooh.
And trust fund baby pet. I'm a Howard woman myself, but you know, it's great to see someone from Hampton Institute doing great things out here. And thank you for sharing that lovely story. My next question, you mentioned there you have experience in evaluating financial models for both TV and feature film investments. Can you break down a bit of the main differences between TV and feature film investments?
Sure. So the media world is ever evolving, just like the music world was. If you were stuck on selling vinyl, you died when CDs came in, and then you died when if you get stuck on CDs, you died when the internet took over the music business. Well, over the last 10 years, there's been a transition in the film and TV game, and that is streaming became an ever-present place. So technology caught up with consumer demand. And so now there's Netflix and Prime and Hulu and Disney Plus and Apple Plus, and you can go watch a straight to the market movie in those places. Whereas before, that just wasn't an opportunity. You had to go down to the theater. Theatrical releases were the norm, and that's why everybody went. Well, Netflix, I think it was Bird Box was the first Oscar-nominated streaming movie, which just opened up the floodgates. So now, if you are a young filmmaker, you have to take in consideration, instead of doing an hour-and-a-half feature film, feature films are 90 minutes at a minimum, you then have to say, I might want to make this a premium TV show, like Your Honor, or like The Undoing with Nicole Kidman. You might want to think about being able to develop your characters in much more very gritty, very close manners, so that the characters become an entity within themselves. So and if you're doing that in a feature film, you only have but so much time to be able to do that. So what you're seeing now is shows like The Wire, like Game of Thrones, and Entourage, and Sex and the City, that go on for years. 20 years ago, that might have just been a movie and that's it. So the opportunity financially to develop a project that goes that long just turns everything on its head. So the thing that you want to do now, and again, this is my opinion, if I was a young filmmaker, I would think about 2 things: the thing that I really want to do, and the thing that is really hot right now. Because you might just get on with a Netflix or a Hulu or a Prime with, they may not be making Westerns right now, and that might be the kind of movie you want to make, but what's happening right now is sci-fi. So you might have to think about sci-fi film that could get turned into a TV show that might get you into a place where you can develop your Western. So it's kind of a multi-stepped approach as to, let me just make a movie and put it out there and see what happens. It's a much more complicated, the audiences are much more sophisticated, demographics are broken down. If I've got a women-led movie, then I know exactly where to put that in the streaming space or in the theatrical space, so it gets directly to that audience that then can appreciate it the most.
Okay, that brings a whole new perspective. You're not only looking at the market, you're looking at the type of product you're putting out there and how that might get you some credibility in the industry to move forward. Wow, okay. Thank you for that. Another question, this is my final one before I pass to Cheo. What questions should filmmakers be asking investors?
Well, that's a great question. It's multifaceted. So let's say you first have to realize what you have. If you're trying to make an independent movie that you're then trying to get released into the marketplace, you then, as the filmmaker, need to know that the investor, at the end of the day, they want their money back and they don't want to put their money at risk. So you need to do everything as possible to answer the questions from the investor before they're asked. Like, how are you going to distribute this? How am I going to know that this is going to get out? What is the timetable? Do you have talent attached? Do you have behind the screen talent attached? And if I can start to answer all those questions before they're asked by the investor, then it makes it that much easier for that investor to make an investment decision in my product.
So know your stuff before you go to them.
And have all the boxes checked. And if you don't have someone attached, it's okay. That's not where you necessarily need to have a major actor or actress attached to something. Because when Fruitvale Station was made, Michael P. Jordan was not a household name. So that's it's the great thing. You want to find the Michael P. Jordan of Fruitvale Station, not the Michael P. Jordan of Creed.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I've learned a lot here. I'm sure our guests have as well. Cheo, any questions from you?
So thanks again, Peter. We go back way back, and we have a lot of shared interest, and but film is one that I think is interesting because as a filmmaker, myself, a producer, writer, filmmaker, director, somebody who's produced some shorts and had some luck with some festivals and distribution, there's still a big challenge for a lot of us artists, and that is, especially if we're indie artists, like we can produce the product, but then we're in a whole, it's like a wild west now. Like there's so many platforms. With Amazon, you can actually send your product to Amazon and it will go up depending on if you have all the production value and you meet their criteria. Netflix is a whole different ballgame. There's others that have different. But I guess the question I would have, and I think that there's some people on the call who might also want to know, if you are coming from this as an artist, as a filmmaker, what is the paradigm shift or the frame shift that you have to make to start thinking like a business person, an investor, somebody who's going to go after investors? It's kind of like Spike Lee said in that opening trailer. It's like you just gotta do everything and then hope luck shines on you. But I think there's another part of that he didn't talk about. So maybe you can share a little bit about how we shift our mindset to go after the kinds of EPs or people who are going to write checks, or what does that look like?
I mean, that's a great question. So there's really three parts to that I think is really important to understand in going from the ground up in making a project. One, you have to realize that whatever story you have, whatever project you have, in some way, shape, and form, it's been done before. So there are models out there that you can follow that can get you there. If you're making a spy thriller movie, God knows James Bond's been made 20 different times and people still come to see it. So don't think that your story has to be so original that it really is groundbreaking. But what it has to have is the integrity that you bring to the story. Your journey is unlike anybody else's journey. So the content is king. So when I look at an early stage opportunity, I really look at how well the script is written. I can give you examples when great scripts were sent to talent and they said, I've got to be in this. And they said, well, those people don't have any money. They said, I work for free. Ethan Hawke has done it. Denzel Washington has done it. And I can go down the road. because if you have a great script that really resonates, you can then open up doors that you might not. Now, when you open up doors, there are one of the things that I think, let me take a half a step back. One of the things I think young filmmakers should realize that when you sit at the end of the movie and this credits roll, it's not one name, it's hundreds of names. So you're never going to make a film, TV, whatever type of content by yourself. There's always going to be collaboration involved. And that collaboration you can use to your benefit. There are talent that have output deals with studios. There's production entities that have output deals. And when you have output deals, that means you have guaranteed distribution. And when you have guaranteed distribution, your risk tolerance gets reduced. And then you open yourselves up to a wider amount of investors or people who can play on the debt side. Many of our things that are done now because Netflix is the biggest purveyor of content in the world, but they will not. They have to own all the content that they show on their platform. So you can't do a licensing agreement with Netflix. However, they will pay handsomely for your IP. So the one thing that you then have to do is be able to make a movie on a negative pickup, and let me define negative pickup. Once a company like Amazon gives you a letter of intent, they then say, once you are able to deliver this movie, I will then give you X. So that means you have to go out and raise the money to make it. Then they'll be able to then, pay you for that particular product if they like it. And the one thing that you always have to do is keep yourself grounded in reality. If everybody is liking horror, if there's, real life crime, if there are seasonal movies, from Halloween to Christmas to Easter to 4th of July, then these are the things that happen every year. What are the things that I can do that gives me the highest level of chance of being exhibited? And those are the questions I would ask myself even before I get started.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a mind shift. Clearly, it's a mind shift because, or a mind frame shift because, as an artist, writer director, we're thinking often. I'll speak of me thinking of, not just genre, but I'm thinking of story. I'm thinking of talent. I'm thinking of what it takes to get the picture finished. I'm not often thinking about like the marketplace. I'm not thinking about what it looks like to go to like. There's actually I don't think it's is it. There's a conference in I think in Hollywood or in LA every year. The marketplace kind of a conference. I forget the name of it, but I'm not thinking like, oh, I'm going to go to this large conference space and there's all of these different booths, all of these different shelves that say, this is the horror genre, this is the romance, this is like, these are all the types of products that are necessary. I know that there's a couple people on the call. I know Derry has a question, may have a question, and I think you may have to leave early, so I want to give you opportunity to introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself, and then if you have a question for Peter, you can go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Roach?
Please call me Pete, please.
Hey, what's up, Pete? I'm Derry, filmmaker from Chicago, living in Los Angeles right now.
Great.
I've been making film independently since 2002. My first deal was with Work Entertainment, and after that, I did another film, IndieFlix, 2008. Then I did another film with was distributed on the Urban Movie Channel, which is now all black. I did another film which is on the holiday film. So my question is something that you said earlier today. Because right now I'm currently in the middle of raising the funds to produce a comedy about a father and a son. And one of the things that you said was like there are streaming networks that would, you know, make the film, they'll be more than happy to possibly put the film on their platform. But is it like possible to like, do they give a letter of intent for that? Say, so like somebody like Showtime, right? Or something like that. So if I talk to Showtime and Showtime says, make the film and we'll see if we like it. Can they give a letter of intent from that? Which would then increase my chances of being able to talk to investors and say, hey, I think, you know, Showtime, this is the letter from Showtime saying that they will show the film, and then the investor will feel a little bit more comfortable. Even if I have talent attached, and then that particular distribution model attached.
So yeah, the short answer to your question is yes. A letter of intent is extremely valuable from especially a platform like Showtime or HBO or networks of that nature that are continuously trying to churn out original content. You see, one of the things that I think is really important for young filmmakers to do is to take off the hat of being the young filmmaker and sit in the hat of the seat of the executive and think like, what are the things that this executive needs for him to keep his job? Well, I need to create as much original programming for the lowest common denominator that allows me to keep my audience base and grow my audience base. Starz has done that tremendously. Let's understand that they didn't think, the studio executive being they, didn't think that there was this huge audience for an African-American based drama that wasn't as gritty as The Wire, but had music involved. And then next thing you know, 50 does Power and cultivates this great audience at Starz. Well, Starz knows that if they don't continue to feed that audience, that audience is going to go away. So they came right back after they did Power with BFM and the Black Family Mafia, which Randy Huggins is the showrunner on that, a good friend of mine. And so he then took that platform and all of these new viewers that were at Starz to then create another round of Power, then to create Force. And now he is driving this machine that allows that audience to come in. Well, he's answered the executive's question before the executive can answer it. Like, how do I keep this audience? You keep this audience because I'll bring back other types of shows that aren't exactly the same, but will allow that audience to come back in. So if you are saying to your investor, coming full circle now, that, hey, listen, I can get Showtime to have a high level of interest. Well, how can you make sure that Showtime takes that level of interest and becomes a letter of intent is by allowing yourselves to make sure while you're making that film to be in communication with Showtime. Showtime, what is your mandate for the year? Well, we want to make sure we're making shows with strong women characters. We want to make sure that we are showing, very wide, dramatic pictures this year. So we want to have very high level cinematography. Then you have to say, okay, how can I implement that into making my program? So then I can then say to my investors, I've checked all the boxes that Showtime's wants. Showtime's going to exhibit this if we do all these things right. And that's why I need you to, as the investor, to take the leap of faith with me based on the fact that I have this letter of intent. I hope that answered your question.
It does. So in the middle of a situation that I'm in right now, we have the script and we're trying to attach talent to it. And we've fallen into, right now, talent, basically, the film that we're doing is about $200,000. But we have talent that want to attach itself to it, but they want like literally like almost half of the budget just for the talent alone. So I have a connection to stars through Lionsgate for distribution, but I don't have a letter of intent in order to get the fund. One of the issues that I'm having is negotiating or counter offering the talent in a way in which they can come aboard on the film without feeling like they're not getting anything in return. But I also want, as a producer, I don't want to feel like I'm giving up everything in order to, for the talent, in order to produce this film. Because I know the talent can help with the distribution, and then having to lead into distribution through a connect. So my connect is, at this present moment, I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Harris.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Mark and I are really good friends. So Mark is like, Gary, produce the movie, and I'm gonna bring it over to Lionsgate. And based on his relationship with Lionsgate right now, he's basically he's helped me get other things done, and made some other connections for me. So basically, I know that if the film is done, it's going to happen. So how do I negotiate with talent in order for them not to, I mean, some of the things that we're getting is $200,000. You want literally like $40,000 of the budget, and you haven't even been on any movies or television like recently at all.
Right. Well, the one thing that there is out there is that, talent, there is an A list, there is a B list, and then there's everybody else. And if you aren't in those first two columns, then if you're taking more than 20% of my budget, I really have to understand the reason why that I'm paying you above market rate, which is, if I have a $200,000 budget, I can't spend more than 40 grand total on talent. That's just as an investor, if I see that scale tipped in the wrong way, that causes me to worry. So what I do is, when I'm at this level of what I call not a controlled budget, I make sure that I can bring in talent that brings eyeballs to the table. So I would rather get somebody who has an IG and is trying to be an actor and has 1 million followers than to get somebody who is in the business, has a rep, and wants 100,000 of my $200,000. You have to be able to know what you have and work within that boundary. Otherwise, you're putting yourself and your film at risk.
Yeah. So that's where we are right now. So I have a wheel of how we're supposed to raise the money. Like, we've developed a model of raising the money through different things: tax incentives, credit, business credit, tax, fiscal sponsorship, crowdfunding. What are some things where you see where if we're looking for the money, trying to find the funding for this film, where do you think we should head, in the direction of?
Well, and you're in a very unique position, because to get to where you are, you had to fully commit to make your movie. And I congratulate you on that, because not too many people get to where you are. So that's great work, just doing what you're doing. First of all, there are risk factors in every movie. You want to be able to bring in different investors based on the risk factor. So if you are working with an All Black or TV1, BET, I'm just saying these because these are the channels that we see that can pump out good urban, original content. If you're working in those spaces, you do have a great opportunity to get picked up, but nothing is going to be guaranteed before you get picked up. So that's a high risk factor. So what I would do is find Well, there's many ways to go, and like Spike Lee said in the beginning, there's so many different ways to skin this cat. There are people that walk in a rich guy's home and walk out with a check. That does happen, but people also win the lottery. So that's if you want to take that kind of risk, the thing that I think makes the most sense is finding distribution at the most basic level where you are, even if to say, hey, listen, we're going to go up on YouTube first and get a certain amount of hits. And if we get a certain amount of hits, we're going to get return. Along with that, while you're making the film, if there is a car, if there is a lamp, put your product placement in there, because that's real revenue you're leaving off the table. So those type of things make then institutional investors say, okay, you've de-risked this to a place where I can think, if I give you $1, you're going to give me $1.50 back. And that's a great return in the marketplace. And you only see that kind of great return when you're talking in the media space. But you, again, have to have all those boxes checked. And that's why, again, the talent game is really hard. That's why, Will Smith and, Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, they get 20 million a movie. That means the budgets, if that's less than 20% of the budget, that's why you see movies getting made for $100 million, literally. So I would really think about making sure I'm staying within the context of filmmaking and budget management, and then making sure I'm getting the biggest bang out of my buck, getting distribution, and then being able to go and get investors. Now, you can also bring on a name and then go to somebody for finishing funds because you've brought on that name. I found Nia Long wants to be in the movie, or if I found somebody of that high quality, then I can say, listen, I need an extra $100,000 to make this movie because I got X amount of talent. Again, 1,000 ways to get this thing done.
One of the things I want one more question real quick. So you talked about product placement. That has been on the table for us and our production team, our producing team. But the thing that I'm lost at is there's two things. Number one, what does the product placement look like, or does it have to be a product placement pitch deck? And two, what individual do I talk to in terms of when I approach a company, like a company like Converse, and I do have one more. So this is a weird kind of thing, but looking for companies that want to break into the urban market. So there are companies that can kind of see like the financial component of it for themselves if they can in a film like ours and then put them inside of urban. Where would I find those individuals? So it's like 3 parts. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me go back and if I forget one of the questions, please just tell me. So I think you were saying, how do I get companies to do product placement with me?
Yes.
And where do I approach those companies, as these mammoth companies like Converse or Coca-Cola or Nike or whatever it may be? So they all have marketing departments. And if you go into their marketing departments, then you'll ask for the person who handles product placement, and they'll be able to direct you there. That's 1,000-foot look in. Each company is different. They may have a whole group that does that. They may have regional people that do that. It really depends on the company, but I would go to the marketing department of a company.
So,
other question,
Gary, appreciate your great questions. Some of these questions actually will be answered as he shifts into. He's got a brief little presentation he's got to make in the next 10 minutes. So let's go ahead and share the screen and shift into that. And I think some of those questions you have will answer, but all really good questions. And I see that we've gotten Saab has joined. I mean, this is an informal forum. If you want to introduce yourself, feel free. If not, then that's okay too. All right, Pete.
Great.
Yeah. Why don't you just take a couple minutes to, I mean, if you have kind of an anecdotal way to express, some of these points uh,
So,
quickly.
well,
Yeah.
well, again, on the first one, how to position a production for financing. It all starts um, with a treatment or a script. Um, you are rarely ever going to be able to get to a place where you can properly introduce your opportunity without a good script or a good treatment. And, has it been done without those things before? Yes, but rarely. And normally it's done like Tracy Morgan did the show OG by just, chatting it up with a few of the people at TBS. That's not going to happen for you or I because we don't have that cachet. So we have to go and put together a pitch deck that will allow us to then go in and tell the attributes, tell the arc of the story, tell the characters that are going to be developed. If this is a feature film, how you're going to do it within the hour to 2 hour span, hour and a half to 2 hour span that you normally make. Avengers was 3 hours, Batman was 3 hours, but most movies are not 3 hours long. Then once you get those two things put together, then you're going to have to find whether you're going to try and go to have this to sell this movie or then to have investors to do that. You need to have your movie have the rights. You need to make sure you have the rights to the movie. You don't want to pitch an idea to someone and then not own that idea, because then that idea goes up and you say, well, I just told that person about this. Make sure you own your rights. Make sure your stuff is copyrighted. Make sure you're going in a way that you're tracking who you're telling about it, because your intellectual property is your cachet, and that's so important in this business. Studio financing versus independent financing. So studios are these mammoth companies that feed off of their portfolio. So yes, someone thought of James Bond, someone thought of Fast and Furious, but the studios own that. And they're going to make sure that they reap the majority of that money. So there's nothing wrong with creating really good content and selling it to a studio. I know that we all want to own equity in something and then watch it turn over and over and over again. And that can happen. But if you have an offer from a studio to buy a script from you, or to option a book that you've written, or to co-produce something with you, then I would definitely take those into hard considerations, because in today's market, doing pre-selling into foreign territories is very hard, because now with the streaming services you're in Netflix in London, or you're in Netflix in South Africa, you're watching what I'm watching. So the territories that are broken off into the world, yet some things don't get into some different territories, but pretty much if I wanted to watch Bird Box and I was in Cape Town, South Africa, or I was in Oakland, California, I would be able to watch that on Netflix. So the ability to sell into foreign territories has been reduced. So independent film financing is a little bit harder than it used to be, but there are other players such as venture capital that is in the marketplace now, such as angel investors, crowdfunding, that allows independent film finance people who are looking for independent financing to then look at that. And then there's actual debt. $200,000 is a lot of money to spend on a project. But that is a contained budget that if you went to a bank and took out a loan, you could probably get that if you had the right credit and the right collateral to back that. So there are other opportunities within the financing and banking world that you can look at that you probably couldn't 20 years ago. Number three, the distributors and how a film makes money for streaming, TV, and theatrical releases. So, as I mentioned earlier, if I'm a streaming service, whether it's Tidal to Netflix or Prime, my objective with my streaming services is to keep as many eyeballs on my streaming services instead of yours. And I do that with original content. And so what I do is try to find really fresh, great young filmmakers that can make multiple projects for me. If you're coming to a streaming services with one project, the likelihood of you getting picked up is a lot smaller than somebody who's coming with 5. Because again, their objective is to get as many projects from the original content side as possible. Theatrical releases is really, I mean, I was just on an economist call 2 weeks ago, and they were predicting, I should say, a year ago, I was on this same economist call, and they were saying that theatrical is dead. 2 weeks ago, they're talking about the revive of theaters and how everybody's coming back. The pandemic has wreaked hell on the movie and film industry and TV also. But now that things are coming back to play, are people going to go back to the theaters? Are people going to spend that amount of money and spend that amount of time in, spaces that are dark and crowded? I think that they are personally, but that's still a question to be answered. So if I was going to do a theatrical released film, I would have my second window, meaning that when it got out of the theaters, I would go directly up onto a platform. Very much like you see Batman is on HBO Max for free now. You can buy it on everything else, but to go see it for free and pay $14 or pay $19.99 and see it one time. That's where HBO Max is going to have an influx of people because of this theatrical release movie that now they own those rights to. And by giving the makers of the movie the opportunity to go video on demand in other places, they've created a higher concentration of people going towards HBO Max. This is all strategy, it's all math, and you have to think 5 steps ahead. So if you don't play chess, I would suggest you learn how to play chess so you can think 3 or 4 steps ahead, no matter what the challenges are. And if you can do that, you're going to have a winning situation as young filmmakers.
All right. Very macro, very, 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 like we're getting a 30,000 foot level, but we're also getting, like I just finished, I just finished my first feature. It's not fully edited. I've got a really powerful sizzle reel trailer, and I'm trying to get some money, trying to get some investors. It's a rough cut, but I'm trying to actually finish, or say I'm trying to finish the funds. So from that smaller level, where just, anecdotally, where are some of the places, a filmmaker could go to get finishing funds?
One of the things I think you said that is really, this is a visual medium. And if I have something to look at that you've made that corresponds with what you're making, then that makes it so much easier because, what is the saying? A picture says 1,000 words. If I can look at something that you're doing towards this project, it makes it that much easier for me to digest and understand how you're doing it. Maybe I don't like it, maybe I do like it, but at least it gives me the opportunity to see. So the sizzle reel is great. I love people going out and doing sizzle reels for projects, because then that gives me an understanding how the content can be absorbed. And then it really lets me know, like, maybe this is going to be something that, a demographic from X age to X age likes more than another age, or maybe this is slanted more towards teens rather than young adults. We can get all of those kind of understandings with a sizzle reel.
Yeah.
So once I get that feeling and understanding, then there are companies that are in business strictly to do gap financing. They're sharks. And when I say sharks, I mean they are expensive. Their money is extremely expensive. So what I like to do is take angel investors who are investing in tech companies, who are investing in real estate, stuff that is not theatrical. And I introduce them, and I have to understand when I'm taking somebody who's not in the business to invest in this business, it's about the education and their understanding of how this works from A to Z. So I can't expect, wow, I need to make payroll on Thursday. Let me go get this guy who's a real estate investor and get him to invest in my movie by Thursday. That's not going to happen. It's going to take time. It's going to take them to be a place where you're bouncing things off of them so that they can absorb it, give you feedback, and then go back. Communication is the key with all investments, especially in the media side.
Yeah. Looked like Derry had a question about, and he's muted now. You're muted, brother. But I think didn't you have a question you put in the chat about sending an introduction letter? I don't know if you got that answered.
Yeah, yeah. So it was basically.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, ask your question again.
So when doing possible product placement, or so when doing possible product placement or looking for talking to investors and things like that, do I
letter or introduction video along with the pitch deck? So that's the thing. I'm trying to, I mean, because the thing of it is, Pete, I've financially funded all of my own films. And this is the first time that I've really stepped out to kind of try to bring in investors. So some of this is kind of new to me because I want to go into a new area, a new arena, even though I have produced my own films. I have gotten distribution deals for them. I've made connections, but now I want to kind of bring in some other components to this.
Well, as we said from back in my banking days, the most expensive money is your own. That's the most expensive money. So when there's opportunity to go out and get investors, always bring in investors because that spreads the risk. And God forbid we want to think about worst case scenarios, but you as a producer always have to think in case of the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. So when you bring all your money into it and things don't work out as planned, it's a tough place to be. And it's a tough place that can take you out of this business, which I've seen happen multiple times. The thing that I think makes most sense is to put together visuals that allow, I know that there's guys who do these YouTube things that are like Marvel stuff and they're trying to predict the next, Will Smith, Prince of Bel-Air type of thing. All those things are great, but those don't necessarily get you an investor or get you a deal because they are not kind of the finished product. So when Cheo says, I'm making a movie and I've made a sizzle reel out of the movie that I'm making, that is so much more valuable than me putting together, a flash 3 minutes of characters and plot lines that are flashing up on the screen that are not going to be indicative of what the movie looks like. So if you can actually go out and shoot 3 minutes, that it's an actual scene within your movie, that's going to be so much more valuable than doing this the other way around, in my opinion.
Right.
Great. Answer your question?
Oh yeah, that is definitely extremely helpful.
Yeah. I don't know, Carrington, did you have any other follow-ups? If not, we can If so, you can ask it. If not, we can go to the next.
I've just been enjoying the conversation. So thank you, Barry, for your questions and Peter for your answers. We can move forward.
Great. So I think the slide before this, there was some questions. Just these are like some basic questions that I think, again, if you come from finance background, you probably know the answers. But if you don't, these are some basics that I thought would be good for you to go through these, Pete.
Sure. So an executive producer is a common term, but there are two different roles in TV as opposed to film. So an executive producer almost is probably more equivalent to a director in TV than it is the person who puts together the financing. Like Larry David is an EP for the Larry David Show because he's out there. It's not just showing how this show is made and where it's going to get shown and the direction of the show and what things are going to be in the scripts and what things get dropped. That's what an executive producer, an executive producer in TV is almost like a general manager of the production. They're covering all sides. An executive producer in film, they are really wrapped up in putting together the financing and all of the ancillary monies that come into a film, tax credits, gap financing, the crowdfunding, all these things that come in to add to the budget or are part of the budget are coming from executive producers within a feature film. So that's kind of the two ways that those two positions are different. Producers in a film kind of do what executive producers do in TV. So they are more general managers. They're making sure that you're staying on time, on budget. They're making sure that when you're out doing the physical production, that you're not out there taking 13 shots of the sunset. They're going to make sure everything moves along. They're going to make sure people are coming out of their trailers and getting to set, that makeup is running straight, that craft service is in place. All these multiple balls that are up in the air. It is amazing. It is amazing to see what happens on a set that's a huge set, and these really good seasoned producers, how they manage and control all of these moving balls. It's an amazing feat. So I think the next question, the best routes to financing a film. So
I know that's kind of, it's all over the place because there's no one.
It's a very broad question. It's a very broad question, but it has some things. The best routes, there are multiple routes that are better than other routes. And the thing that I think before you start out on the journey of making a film is that you choose a route that allows you the highest level of success. So one of the things that I see is people coming to the table with just really good projects that just have no chance of being financed because they didn't think about financing when they started. They just thought about, hey, I want to make a movie about cats, or I want to make a movie about dogs. And that's great. You can make a movie about cats or dogs. And there are many movies that get made like that. But those movies that get made are answering questions that need to be answered so that money can be put into these projects. Your film is like a company. Many people create LLCs that are the company, that are the film itself. So as I'm investing into that film as an LLC, and I get a position, an equity position. And if I sell the film for $100 and you own 7%, well, you get $7. Now, if I sell the film for $100 million and you own 7%, you get $7 million. So it's really a different kind of way that you have to kind of take a step back from your creative self to say, what is the best way for me to make sure that, one, at the end of the day, my film is getting exhibited, and a byproduct of being exhibited means that there is a financial transaction somewhere along that road. So that's if I say there isn't a best route, but make sure you're on one of the routes.
Yeah, I think audience is something that filmmakers think about intuitively at some point, but then sometimes you don't go further in that thought process and say, okay, well, this is my audience, which is very important, right? But then you don't go further and say, well, how did that become monetized? What's the best platform for this audience? Where am I going to position this product? Like we've talked about before, like, you know, I have XYZ product. Should it be on FX? Should it be on Discovery? Should it be on Hulu? And I just think a lot of artists, a lot of filmmakers, you know, at least starting out, don't intuitively make those connections.
Right, and you know, in many times, it happens with biopics a lot, that people say, well, is this the right time to make a film about X person, about a person? The person, as crazy as this sounds, and understand how I'm saying this, the person who you're making the biopic about is almost irrelevant. It's how you're making it. You're not going to take a cradle to grave story and be able to make that. Look at great biopics like Lincoln, which showed a 3-month period in his life. But that was the 3-month period that defined him as the president that we know in history. Whether it's done correctly or not, it's that period. So you're looking at things from a very segregated position instead of this totality of telling a guy who lived 70 years to tell his cradle to grave story.
Yeah. Carrington, there's a question. I think maybe you can look at. There's some questions in the chat, and maybe you can put those in front of Peter.
Absolutely. So yeah, we have a bunch of questions in the chat. Starting with, I believe, Gary's question on the Sizzle reel. Were we able to answer that? It says, does the Sizzle reel have to have the actual talent / named actors if you're trying to attract investors to the project?
No, absolutely not. In fact, many sizzle reels that have been done for major motion pictures end up attaching larger stars to it because they understand how that character is being portrayed. So the sizzle reel was a great stepping stone into getting the right talent. See, studios give output deals to talent. Wanda Sykes, who was a classmate of mine, has an output deal with a studio. You know, there are things that then if you go do something and a show and they say, we want to attach Wanda Sykes, and they're saying like, okay, Wanda Sykes makes sense for this role because I can see her in that role. Without that script or without the sizzle reel, it's very hard to make that leap.
Lovely. We have another question that says, how do you sell the equity in the film without giving up control of the film? What's the best percentage to sell?
Well, you can sell up to 49%. Keep control. You know, listen, equity is used as an incentivizer to make allies for your film. If I had an A-list actor, I would pay them not only with cash, but with equity, because then the upside of the film would be just as important to them as to I. So they would go out and do more Jay Leno's, or maybe Jay Leno's, I'm dating myself, more Tonight shows and Ellen and all these different type of the Breakfast Club, because they know that the more the film makes, the more they make, because they're an equity participant. So I would make sure that I would use that equity to gain allies to get me further down the street, because your equity is currency just as much as money is your currency.
So power is where the money's at. And the more power you have, the better your chances are to keep control and do your thing. I think we have one more question from Derry. I'm not sure I totally understand it. Would you like to ask it?
Okay, I'm not trying to dominate the conversation at all, so please forgive me. So my question is, this is something I've been pondering, right? So our film is an LLC, it's set up with it as a business. And we have fiscal sponsorship. We have like all of those different, we have a lot of different things in place in order to obtain the funding for this project. And this is just something I've been really pondering. How do I sell, like a LLC have shares, correct?
That is correct.
So I know crowdfunding is a possibility, and something that's been bothering me is we do have a crowdfunding campaign, but I feel like sometimes people, they want to help, they want to share, but I want people to invest in something. So how would I set it up? And this is the how's up. How would I set it up to be able to say, if you invest this much, you get a share of the company. So that way, when the company makes money, then you'll be able to make money from it. Instead of as a crowdfunding, say, hey, can you please give me $10 or $50 or $250? Can you please give me $1,000, and then you get a free ticket to the show? Like I want to incentivize that by being able to for them to feel like it's a co-op in a way.
So, that's a great question. And I think that you have to take a half a step back to really understand the breadth of what you're dealing with here. So crowdfunding has its positives, it has its negatives. The things that make it a larger positive is if you have some level of viral exposure, like a large internet exposure, large social media exposure, that you can then have people participate in giving small amounts of money into your production. I mean, it's very much like political campaigns that say, I'm not going to take any money from the big corporations, but I do need money from my constituents or my base, and I'll need $5 at a time. Well, if they can reach a large base of people, that works. But if you're limited in the base of people that you're going to get, then the producer, and this is why the producer has to really be based in a reality of themselves and their surroundings. Because there's one thing that we all are working on is the same clock. There's only 24 hours in the day, and there's only so much time you're going to do to make this movie. So if you spend your time and energy in a place that's not going to be giving you the best return, then you really have to say, what am I doing? Crowdfunding is great if you've got a large constituent of people to go to that can then give you money to then go in. Now, if you don't, then you need to have a campaign that gets you to a larger group. So those two things have happened in real time. However, if you can create that, spend that amount of time and energy and money into creating a situation where you're taking your idea to those people who can write a check for what all those people can collect, then it's much easier going towards those individual investors. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I think going back to, and then I think we'll go to the next slide or take a last minute questions, but I think going back to the video that we opened with Spike Lee saying, there's no golden path. There's not like one route to get there in terms of funding a film. Personally, I know like we started off getting support with foundations. So we got several major grants in the philanthropic community, George Soros, Ford Foundation. There are these groups that will fund a film project, and then we were able to spin that off by getting partnerships with like MSNBC and the Griot, which was a black website they had back in the day, where we would then, you produce a deck and you say whatever your budget is, and then you attract sponsors. So we would attract, whether it was the U.S. Army, Chrysler, Kmart, whatever those sponsors were, to run ads, during the short films that would present on their, on their platform, on that website. But what I learned is that you just got to take a lot of the same creativity that you have as an artist and apply that to film financing, apply that to funding, and we can call it bootstrapping. And so I guess another question I wanted to throw out there was that, we're from the generation, you talked about Jay Leno. I was always a David Letterman kind of guy anyway. But we talk about that, being from this generation, we can remember not only Spike Lee, but Robert Townsend, Hollywood Shuffle. He funded a film with credit cards, maxed out, 3 credit cards. That story is legendary. I don't know what people are doing now. Are there any stories that you've heard of, Matty Rich back in the day? Any stories you've heard of now, how people are, beyond just like, I've done Indiegogo, I've done crowdfunding, but if there's other things you're thinking about, how people get creative to get their films financed?
Well, music and film have always been interrelated, and by getting a great soundtrack that then follows along with a film or TV. We saw what The Godfather of Harlem did in the last 3 seasons. We've seen, and that's Swiss Beats, taking a period piece and being able to intertwine, modern day music, hip hop into that show that then attracts a really stronger audience that then makes Epic say, I want to put more money into this show, and being able to, and that's, we're seeing the end results. But they went to Epics and said, this is how we're going to do it. And Epics was like, wow, that's a great idea. Intertwine talent, history and music together. Like, that just made so much sense. And so, yeah, you got to tip your hat to those people who are looking at, taking scenarios, and we see this now blossoming, and it's been blossoming, but with the Twitter and the Instagram and TikTok, and folks being able to understand their creativeness that then attracts marketing campaigns that then allows them to then make a living doing that. Well, that then, those monies then can be translated into long form stories. But to do long form stories, you need good writers, and good writers are not, good writers are, just like talent. They're just not everywhere. But once you find them and you can feed them in the right direction, man, you can go a long way with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that Derry had to go. He was headed to the Pan African Film Festival in LA, so I'm glad.
Good luck.
Yeah, he had to leave. I don't know if you saw in the chat, he had some comments for you, saying that your rich insightfulness has helped him considerably. So that's good. I don't know if there's any other questions. We only have Sav in the call now. I don't know if you have questions, if you want to put them in the chat. If you don't, I hope you've enjoyed this. Now would be a chance to ask them if you have any. Pete, what are you working on now?
Wow, we've got a couple of things that are in the queue. We've got some biopics that we're working on, and we're, one of the things that we've been doing is really chasing real stories that are community driven. I mean, we've gotten the ability to look at what happened with the George Floyd situation and create content behind that. And we're looking at, what's going on in the NFL and speaking with people that are and getting the life rights of, the first and second black quarterbacks to really affect the NFL, and Randall Cunningham and Warren Moon, and really tell their stories that are not just from their perspective, but from the community perspective of athletes.
Yeah.
So,
Left the quarterback out.
I'm
Redskin.
sorry?
You forgot a quarterback from, you know.
Doug Williams is
Yeah.
is a great guy, but we don't have him as of yet. So
Right.
we do have Randall and we do have Warren. We're chasing Doug, but we don't have him as of yet.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we think is really important is to tell stories that affect a lot of people and that are able to look back and you step back 20 years from now, and you look at these stories and it still resonates with you. So, we've been doing that. We're developing a couple of TV shows on the urban experience, on the experience of young athletes. So we're doing multiple stories that really tell some great journeys that we think are going to turn out well.
Great.
And some funny stuff too. I think it's really important to be funny along the way.
Keep it light. People love the entertainment and they love the lightness, right? Yeah. The last question I thought I would just throw out there for you, because the frame for this monthly series is not only how to develop stories and how to present them in the marketplace, but also there's the through line throughout all of this is self-determination. I mean, we're partnering with the Black Cultural Zone here in Oakland, which is a incubator, if you will, of Black entrepreneurship and people who are working collectively to change kind of the narrative, change the game, and how we're not just consumers, we're producers and business people. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about just the notion of self-determination, even coming from an HBCU perspective, but taking that even into where we're going in this moment in history.
Well, I mean, when we look at really what is a thriving business in the world now is venture capital. And you look at what's going on in Silicon Valley, you look at what's going on in the world of economics, and you have to step back and you're saying, like, how do we play a part of that? And, minorities are getting 7 to 10% of underrepresented founders, that includes women, are getting only 7% of the venture capital money that is being displaced into companies on an annual basis. So what does that mean? 20 to 60 billion dollars is being sent out, and only 7% is getting into the community. That's not right, but it's changing. And I see these young people at Harlem Capital, at Overlooked Ventures, at all these places that are now giving young entrepreneurs the opportunity to get funding to build their businesses. We had to take a generation that allowed us to take risks other than going to jobs that were service oriented. Now we're in a place where there's a larger group of entrepreneurs that are now looking to get investors to come into their business. And I think that is so important, because for us as filmmakers, we are just reflecting what's happening in our filmmaking in terms of what is happening in the world. And from our eyes, the ability to see more entrepreneurs out there taking a risk and opening up businesses, from shoemakers to tech companies to other ancillary company, real estate opportunities. They're there, and they're really making an impact on people's lives. And I think that that is so important at this stage in the game. I hope that makes sense to everybody. And I'm really looking forward to this next year. I think we're going to do some great things. From a company standpoint, we're moving into a brick and mortar situation where we're doing more physical production than just producing. And, hopefully, we'll still continue to grow and get better.
Not hopefully, I'm sure you will. If there's any, if you have any handles, social media wise, or if you have a website, anything you want to share, you can put that in the chat. Thanks to God. Thanks again. I mean, you have provided a wealth of information, and I think it's not about, like, there's a saying you may be familiar with, whether it's 8 or 80, it doesn't matter, right? It's like what really matters is that you have the people that need to be on the call, right? And so we didn't have a lot of people here. We didn't have even 8, but we had you. We had somebody who has a great resource of information, and so I'm so glad that we recorded this. It'll go out to. I've gotten some emails during this call, at least by 4 people who wanted to be on the call, but were looking forward to the recording. So, we've got it down for prosperity, and your story will be told. So thanks a lot again for being here.
Well, I look forward to it, and I look forward to many more conversations, because there's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to go. I really wanted to talk about the film festivals and making sure that we're participating in them, making sure we're getting to Sundance and participating in Black House. These are the places where just young minds and really good minds get really put together. And God knows, when we all collaborate together, there's so many things that can get done. So I'm excited about that.
Last thing, are you familiar with Macro? Are you familiar with that company?
No, I'm not familiar with Macro.
It's a content company with Charles King. It's a Black-owned company. But there are. You mentioned some others. I think you mentioned some VCs or some capital funds. But I think that there is this wave of ownership, and there's a wave of determination that we are forging. A lot of the millennials, folks that are, Carrington's generation coming out of college, who are going to be creating this new horizon to take us to the next level. So, Carrington, anything you wanna sign off with?
Yes, so my Generation Z, we love streaming platforms. That's all we know. I haven't had cable in years. And so I know that has definitely shifted the way that we consume media. And so I really appreciate your perspective on, how all of this works. And it's brought upon a different perspective for myself, and I'm sure people that are in my same age range. But thanks again, Mr. Roach.
I appreciate you guys having me. Look forward to further conversation.
And let's share the screen to show, just again for the recording session, who our guest will be next month.
Yeah. So can everyone see it here?
Not yet. Is it up?
Yeah, it should be.
Okay. Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Yes. So join us on May 28th for our next session of StoryLab. Oh, go back, with filmmaker Kamisi Norwood, where we'll talk about frame for frame. And this will tell us more about the basics of visual storytelling, from concept to storyboards, to how to frame shots on set. And you'll watch classic clips, gain insight, and learn the difference between a movie and real cinema. Dropping the link to the event in the chat. Here.
All right. I think we're good. So Pete, thanks again, brother. Appreciate your perspective. We'll be chatting.
Dale, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I'll send out the recording to everyone, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Peace.